The rain hammered against my skull like bullets as rough hands yanked me up by my jacket collar. I blinked water from my eyes and found myself staring at a gun barrel, then past it, into the coldest gray eyes I'd ever seen. The man holding the weapon wore a suit that probably cost more than everything I'd owned in my entire 17 years of life. Blood, someone else's blood, speckled his white shirt collar. "You picked the wrong porch to die on, girl," he said. I should have run. Should have begged. Instead, I looked at that massive house behind him, at the warm light spilling through tall windows, and something broke inside me. I started laughing. Couldn't help it. After 3 days without food, 2 nights sleeping in drainage tunnels, and a lifetime of wrong porches, wrong choices, wrong everything, what did one more bullet matter? What's funny? The gun didn't waver. I managed between shivers that had nothing to do with the cold. "You think this is the worst thing that's happened to me this week?" His eyes narrowed. The rain kept falling. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. He glanced over his shoulder, just for a second, and when he turned back his expression had shifted into something I couldn't quite read. "Get inside before you catch pneumonia. We'll figure out what to do with you after you're dry." I didn't move. Couldn't. Every survival instinct I'd honed on the streets screamed that walking into that house meant walking into a cage. But my knees were buckling and my vision was starting to tunnel, and the cold had worked its way so deep into my bones that I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. He caught me before I hit the stone steps. The last thing I registered before darkness swallowed me was the scent of his cologne mixing with gunpowder and rain, and the strangest thought, at least if I die here, I'll die warm. When I woke up, I was in a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. The sheets were soft in a way I didn't know fabric could be soft. The room was bigger than most apartments I'd squatted in, all cream and gold and expensive. A fire crackled in an actual marble fireplace. For a second I thought maybe I had died. Maybe this was whatever came after. Then my stomach cramped with hunger and I knew I was still alive. Dead people don't feel this hungry. I sat up too fast. The room spun. My head throbbed. "Easy." The voice came from the doorway. A woman in her 50s stood there, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing an apron over clothes that probably cost more than a month's rent. She carried a tray that smelled like heaven. "You've been out for 14 hours. Your body needed it." "Where?" My voice came out like sandpaper. "Mr. Moretti's residence. I'm Maria, the housekeeper. He asked me to see to you." She set the tray on the nightstand beside the bed. "Soup. Bread. Actual fruit that wasn't bruised or half-rotten. Moretti." The name ricocheted through my skull. Even on the streets, even in the shelters and soup kitchens and places where people tried very hard not to know anything about anything, you heard about the Morettis. They ran everything from the docks to City Hall. Drugs, gambling, protection, all of it flowed through their hands like water. I'd literally passed out on a Mafia Don's doorstep. "I need to leave." I threw off the covers, realized someone had dressed me in silk pajamas. My heart hammered. My clothes. Being laundered. "Eat first." Maria's tone left no room for argument. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you at noon. That gives you 2 hours to bathe and eat like a human being instead of a feral cat." She left before I could protest. I stared at the tray. My stomach growled so loud it echoed off the walls. I'd been hungry before. 3 days without food wasn't my personal record. But something about the smell of that soup made my hands shake as I reached for the spoon. I told myself I'd eat slowly. Savor it. Make it last. I devoured everything on that tray in under 5 minutes, barely tasting it, just shoveling food into my mouth like I was afraid someone would take it away. When I finished, I sat there with the empty bowl in my lap, breathing hard, feeling my stomach cramp as it tried to process actual nutrients for the first time in weeks. Then I noticed the window. 3rd floor, maybe 4th. Too high to jump without breaking something important. The door might be locked. Even if it wasn't, I had no idea how to navigate this fortress. And I was wearing silk pajamas with no shoes and no idea where they'd put my clothes. I was trapped. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else. Something that felt dangerously like relief. The bathroom was marble and chrome and had a shower with 6 different heads that I didn't know how to work. I stood under the hot water for what felt like hours, watching weeks of grime spiral down the drain, scrubbing my skin until it turned pink. There was expensive shampoo that smelled like flowers. Conditioner that made my hair feel like silk instead of straw. Soap that actually lathered instead of that industrial stuff from the shelters. I was toweling off when I noticed it, a small camera in the corner of the bathroom ceiling, its red light dark. Either they weren't watching or they wanted me to think they weren't. I found fresh clothes laid out on the bed when I returned. Jeans that fit perfectly. A soft sweater in dark green. New underwear and socks still in packaging. Someone had measured me while I was unconscious. Someone had gone shopping. Someone had decided I was worth the investment. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it made me curious. At exactly noon, Maria appeared at my door. "He's ready for you." She led me through hallways lined with art that belonged in museums. Past rooms full of men in expensive suits who stopped talking when we passed, their eyes tracking me like I was something between a curiosity and a threat. We descended a grand staircase into a part of the house that smelled like leather and cigars and old money. Maria knocked on a heavy oak door. "Come in." The office was all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The kind of room designed to make you feel small. Behind a massive desk sat the man from last night. In daylight, I could see he was maybe 40 with silver threading through dark hair. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against tan skin. He'd changed suits, but the eyes were the same, gray as gunmetal, twice as hard. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I remained standing. Not out of defiance exactly. More out of the street logic that sitting meant staying, and I hadn't decided yet if I was staying. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile, but not quite. "Maria says you ate like you haven't seen food in a month." 3 weeks. No point lying. He probably already knew anyway. "Look, I didn't know whose house this was. I just needed somewhere dry to sleep. I'll leave now." "And go where?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I had no answer to that. The shelter had a 3-night limit and I'd used mine up last month. The soup kitchen didn't open until 5. The drainage tunnel where I'd been sleeping flooded when it rained this hard. "What's your name?" he asked when I didn't respond. "Does it matter?" "It does to me." Something in his tone made me answer. Like he wasn't asking out of politeness or because he had to. Like he actually wanted to know. "Alexis." "Lexi." "How old are you, Lexi?" 17. Then, because I was tired of lying and he probably already knew this too, almost, "I've got 4 months. He was quiet for a long moment, still studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. His fingers drummed once against the desk, the only sign he wasn't completely composed. "Do you know who I am?" "Marco Moretti." "Everyone knows who you are. Then you know what I do. What this house represents." "Yeah." I met his gaze, refusing to look away first. "You're a criminal." "So what?" "The foster family I ran from 6 months ago were all pillars of the community. Church every Sunday. Charity galas. Perfect neighbors." I pulled up my sweater just enough to show the edge of a scar on my ribs. Guess which one left more marks? His expression shifted. Something dark flickered behind those gray eyes. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Show me." My hands moved before I could second-guess the decision. I lifted my shirt just high enough to reveal the cigarette burns on my ribs. 5 of them. Neat little circles of scar tissue, old enough to have turned white but recent enough that I still flinched when someone moved too fast near me. I expected pity. Maybe disgust. People on the streets learned quick not to show their damage because it made you a target. But Marco Moretti didn't look away and he didn't offer sympathy. Instead, he picked up the phone on his desk. "Tony, I need you to find out everything about Lexi." He looked at me, waiting. "Walsh." "Lexi Walsh. Birth date around June 2009. Focus on her time in foster care over the past 2 years. Specifically the Henderson family." His eyes never left mine. "I want names, addresses, bank accounts, employment records. Everything." "And Tony?" "I want it before dinner." He hung up without waiting for a response. "Why?" I asked. "Because people who hurt children under my protection tend to have very unfortunate accidents." My breath caught. "I'm not under your protection. You slept under my roof. That changes things." He stood, walked to the window overlooking grounds that stretched for what looked like acres. Manicured gardens. A fountain. Trees that probably cost more to maintain than most people made in a year. "I'm going to make you an offer, Lexi. You can refuse and I'll have someone drive you wherever you want to go with $5,000 in your pocket. No strings attached. No questions asked." I waited. There was always an or. "Or you can stay." He turned back to face me. "My daughter needs a companion. Someone her age. She's been isolated since her mother died 2 years ago. Homeschooled, protected, lonely. You'd attend classes with her, eat with the family, live here. In exchange, you get safety, education, and a chance to figure out what comes next. You want me to be your daughter's paid friend? I want you to show her that survival isn't the same as living." His voice was quiet. "Serious. But understand this, If you stay, you follow my rules. You don't leave the grounds without approval and escort. You don't talk about what you see or hear in this house to anyone outside these walls. You become part of this family, which means you're protected but also watched. Can you live with that? Every instinct screamed trap. But I'd learned something in 6 months on the streets. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the only real choice. Besides, I'd seen something in Marco Moretti's eyes when I showed him those scars. Recognition. Like he knew what it meant to wear damage on your skin. And $5,000 wouldn't last long. It never did. Money disappeared fast when you were sleeping rough. It got stolen or spent on emergencies or stretched so thin it might as well not exist. But a roof, food, safety. Those were worth more than cash. I'll stay, I said. For now. Good. He pressed a button on his desk and Maria appeared like she'd been waiting just outside. Maria will show you to your room. You'll meet Isabella at dinner. 7 sharp. Don't be late. I turned to leave. Lexi. I looked back. The camera in your bathroom, it was never on. I don't need to watch you to know you're thinking about running. But here's what you should know. He sat back down, picked up a pen, returned to whatever paperwork I'd interrupted. Every person who's ever tried to leave this family has ended up regretting it. Not because we stopped them, but because they realized too late that they left the only people who actually gave a damn whether they lived or died. The door closed behind me with a sound like a cell locking. Maria led me to a room 3 doors down from where I'd woken up. This one was smaller, more lived-in feeling. A desk with a laptop. Bookshelves filled with actual books, not the kind for show. Windows that overlooked a garden where roses bloomed despite the rain. This was supposed to be for Isabella's au pair, Maria explained, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the already perfect bedspread. But she refuses to have one. Says they're all spies reporting back to her father. Is she wrong? Maria's smile was thin. You're a clever girl. That's good. You'll need it here. She moved to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. Dinner is formal. There's a dress in the closet that should fit. And Lexi? Yeah. Isabella lost her mother to a car bomb meant for her father. She watched it happen from 15 feet away. Remember that when you meet her. She's not like other rich girls. She can't afford to be. The door clicked shut. I stood alone in my new room, my new cage, and tried to process everything. Yesterday I'd been sleeping in doorways. Today I was somehow employed as companion to a Mafia princess whose life made mine look simple. The laptop sat on the desk, closed. I walked over, hesitated, then opened it. No password required. Another test, probably. Everything here was a test. I pulled up a browser and typed Marco Moretti into the search bar. The results were extensive and contradictory. Philanthropist who donated millions to children's hospitals. Suspected crime lord with connections to 3 murders. Self-made business mogul. Heir to organized crime dynasty. Devoted father. Ruthless killer. Every article mentioned his late wife, Elena. Beautiful. Passionate. Involved in charity work. Dead at 38 when a bomb tore through her car. Then I searched Isabella Moretti. The photos showed a girl about my age with her mother's dark curls and her father's gray eyes. In the older pictures she was smiling, real smiles that reached her eyes. After Elena's death, the smiles disappeared. The most recent photo was from 6 months ago at some charity function, her standing slightly apart from her father, face carefully blank. I recognized that expression. I'd perfected it myself in the Henderson house. The look that said, "I'm fine," when everything inside was screaming. The clock on the laptop read 3:47 p.m. 3 hours until dinner. 3 hours to decide if staying was brave or suicidal. I needed to see more of this place. Understand what I'd walked into. The hallway was empty. I moved quietly, the way you learn to move when noise means getting caught, when being invisible means being safe. Most doors were closed, but a few stood open. A library with leather chairs and the smell of old paper. A gym with equipment that looked military grade. A room full of security monitors showing every inch of the property. I froze at that one. A man sat watching the screens, but his attention was on his phone, thumbs moving fast. I backed away slowly, carefully, before he could look up. The next door was different. Music leaked from underneath, something classical and heartbreaking. I pressed my ear against the wood. Someone was crying. My hand moved to the doorknob before I could think better of it. It turned. The room was a studio, all windows and light even on this gray day. A grand piano dominated the space. At it sat a girl with dark curls, playing through tears that streamed down her face. Isabella. She didn't stop playing when she saw me. Didn't acknowledge my presence at all. just kept playing this heartbreaking piece while crying like the world had ended, her fingers moving across the keys with the kind of muscle memory that spoke to years of practice. I should have left. Should have given her privacy. Instead, I walked over and sat on the bench beside her. Close enough to be present, far enough not to crowd. She played for another 3 minutes. When she finally stopped, her hands remained on the keys, trembling slightly. "My mother taught me this piece," she said without looking at me. Her voice was hoarse. "Chopin. Prelude in E minor. She said it sounds like rain on graves." "It does. You're the homeless girl my father brought in." "Not a question." "Yeah. He thinks you'll be good for me? Like a pet project. Something to fix." Her fingers pressed down on a key, holding it until the note faded to nothing. "He's always trying to fix things he can't control. I'm not a pet." Finally she turned to face me. Up close, I could see that her eyes weren't just gray like her father's, they were rimmed red from crying. Hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything soft and left only armor. "Then what are you?" "Someone who knows what it's like when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from." She studied me for a long moment. Really looked at me, not through me the way most rich people did. "Maria told you about my mother. She told me you watched it happen. Did she tell you I was supposed to be in that car? That I threw a tantrum about going to the gallery opening because I wanted to stay home and practice for a recital? That my mother went alone because I was being a spoiled brat?" Her voice cracked. "Did she tell you they found pieces of her 3 blocks away? That I had to identify her by the bracelet on her wrist because there wasn't enough face left? I didn't have words for that. Didn't have comfort to offer. The platitudes people always gave, 'It's not your fault,' and 'she wouldn't want you to blame yourself.' They were garbage. I knew because I'd heard them all after my own mother overdosed, and they'd meant nothing. So I did the only thing that made sense. I put my hand over hers on the piano keys." She flinched. Then, slowly, her fingers curled around mine. Her hand was cold despite the warmth of the room. We sat like that while shadows lengthened across the floor and the rain continued its endless drumming against the windows. 2 girls with different scars, connected by the simple truth that sometimes survival is all you've got. "I'm Lexi," I said finally. "I know. I watched the security footage from last night. You laughed at my father when he pointed a gun at you." "Yeah, well, I've never been accused of being smart." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile but close. "I think we're going to get along." A knock at the door made us both jump. Maria stood in the entrance, that same disapproving frown firmly in place. "Dinner in 90 minutes. Both of you need to be presentable. Isabella, your father has guests tonight. The Russo family." Isabella's hand tightened around mine so hard it hurt. "Business dinner?" "Yes. Which means both of you stay quiet, look pleasant, and leave when dismissed." "Understood." We nodded. When Maria left, Isabella released my hand and stood. She walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. "The Russos are our biggest rivals. This dinner is either a peace offering or a prelude to war." She turned back to look at me. "Either way, tonight you'll see what this family really is. What I really am." "And what's that?" "A bargaining chip. A prize to be won or lost. A piece on someone else's chessboard." Her laugh was bitter. "Wear the black dress Maria picked out. It has pockets. You'll want somewhere to put your hands when things get tense." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with a piano that still echoed with grief. The dining room could have hosted a small wedding. Crystal chandelier hanging from a ceiling painted with cherubs and clouds. Table that sat 20, currently set for 7. Place settings that probably cost more than a car. Everything was designed to intimidate, to remind you of your place in the hierarchy. I arrived at 6:58, 2 minutes early, wearing the black dress and the most neutral expression I could manage. The dress fit perfectly, which meant someone had very accurately guessed my measurements. The thought made my skin crawl and my curiosity spike in equal measure. Isabella was already there, seated at her father's right. She transformed from the crying girl at the piano into something carved from ice. Perfect posture, blank face, hands folded in her lap like she was posing for a portrait. Marco Moretti sat at the head of the table in a suit that probably cost 5 figures. He acknowledged me with a slight nod toward the seat across from Isabella. I sat. Tried not to stare at the 5 men who filed in behind me. For were clearly bodyguards, big, alert, hands never far from concealed weapons. They positioned themselves along the walls like statues. But the 5th man commanded the room the moment he entered. Late 50s, silver-haired, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore his expensive suit like armor and his confidence like a crown. Marco. His voice carried the trace of an Italian accent, the kind that came from growing up speaking both languages. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Vincent. Marco shook his hand. The grip looked friendly. The tension in both men's shoulders said otherwise. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Vincent Russo took the seat at the opposite end of the table, creating a no-man's land of polished wood between him and Marco. His bodyguards mirrored Marco's positioning. The room felt like a powder keg. His eyes swept over Isabella, dismissed her like she was furniture, then landed on me. Lingered. And who is this lovely addition to your household? A guest, Marco said smoothly, reaching for his water glass. Now, about the shipment from... I wasn't aware you were taking in strays, Marco. Especially one so young. Vincent's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Does she have a name, this guest? Every survival instinct I'd honed screamed at me to stay silent. Let the powerful men talk. Don't draw attention. Become wallpaper. But something in the way he looked at me, like I was something to be appraised and acquired, made my spine straighten. Lexi, I said, meeting his gaze. And I'm not a stray. The room went deadly quiet. One of the bodyguards shifted his weight. Marco's expression didn't change, but I felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. Isabella's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her mask all evening.
Vincent laughed, the sound echoing off the high ceiling. Spirit. I like that. Tell me, Lexi, do you know what business your generous host is in? The kind where asking too many questions is bad for your health. This time, his laugh was genuine, though no warmer. Smart and pretty. A dangerous combination. He turned back to Marco. I see why you keep her close. Though I hope for her sake, she understands the costs of proximity to our world. She's learning, Marco said, his voice carrying a warning that I was starting to recognize. Shall we discuss why you're really here, Vincent? The pleasantries evaporated like steam. Maria and two servers I hadn't seen before began bringing food, some kind of fish that smelled expensive, vegetables I couldn't name, wine that probably cost more per bottle than I used to spend on food in a month. I picked at my plate, trying to be invisible while listening to every word. The docks, Vincent said between bites, cutting his fish with surgical precision. Specifically, the eastern terminals. You've been expanding there. Into territory we've held for 15 years. Territory you've neglected for 3, Marco countered. Nature abhors a vacuum, Vincent. You know that. Nature also respects boundaries, especially ones enforced with blood. Isabella's fork clattered against her plate. The sound was deafening in the tense silence. Both men looked at her. She picked it up, face composed, but I saw her hand shake as she set it down more carefully. If you think some conversations shouldn't happen in front of the people they'll hurt most, hit that like button so this story reaches someone who knows what it's like to be in the room where decisions about your life get made without you. I knew what she was remembering. Maria had told me enough. Car bomb. Her mother. The way violence in this world didn't care about collateral damage. Careful with threats at my dinner table, Marco said quietly, but there was steel underneath the civility. Especially in front of my daughter. No threat. A reminder. Vincent dabbed his mouth with his napkin, the gesture somehow menacing. I've come to propose a solution. A merger of interests. Your distribution network, my supply chain. Together, we could control the entire eastern seaboard. Eliminate competition. Maximize profit. Create something that would last generations. I don't share power. Neither do I. Which is why I'm proposing a union of a different kind. Vincent's eyes flicked to Isabella, and something cold settled in my stomach. Your daughter is 17. My son, Anthony, is 22. Harvard-educated. Being groomed to take over our legitimate operations. A marriage would unite our families, end the territorial disputes, and create a dynasty that could rule this city for generations. The world tilted sideways. I looked at Isabella. The ice mask had shattered. Underneath was pure terror. Marco's voice was soft. Deadly. My daughter is a person, not a bargaining chip. In our world, there's no difference. You know that as well as I do. Vincent leaned back in his chair, supremely confident. Think about it, Marco. A wedding or a war. Those are your options. Romeo and Juliet, or the Corleones. I know which one I'd prefer. He stood, his bodyguards immediately moving to flank him. You have 1 week to decide. After that, I'll assume you've chosen war, and I'll act accordingly. He nodded to his men. Thank you for the meal. It was enlightening. They left like a storm passing through, leaving wreckage in their wake. The moment the door closed, Isabella bolted from her chair. She didn't run. That would have been undignified, and she'd been trained too well for that, but she moved fast, her heels clicking against marble as she disappeared down the hallway. I heard a door slam somewhere in the distance. Marco sat motionless, staring at his untouched wine like it held answers he wasn't finding. Sir, I started. Go to her. He still didn't look at me. Make sure she's okay. And Lexi. I waited. What you did tonight, speaking to Vincent like that, it was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I haven't decided which yet. Does it matter? He finally looked up. His eyes were tired. In this world, yes. Because brave people become assets. Stupid people become casualties. Figure out which one you are before next week. I found Isabella in her bathroom, dry heaving over the toilet. I grabbed a washcloth, ran it under cold water, and pressed it to the back of her neck the way I'd learned to do for myself after bad nights. I'm not marrying him, she gasped between breaths. I don't care what my father decides. I don't care about peace or war or any of it. I'll run before I let them sell me like property. Then run. Right now. I know how to disappear. I can teach you. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You'd help me? I just told one of the most dangerous men in the city that I'm not a stray. At this point, I'm either all in or all dead. Might as well make it count. She laughed, a broken, desperate sound that turned into a sob. He'll kill Anthony Russo before he lets me marry him. I know my father. And then Vincent will retaliate, and we'll have a war, and more people will die like my mother died. Because of me. It's always because of me. I sat on the cold tile floor beside her. Or we find option 3. There is no option 3. There's always an option 3. We just haven't thought of it yet. I took her hand. Give me time. Let me think. We have a week. Then I'd better think fast. We sat there until her breathing evened out and my legs went numb from the cold floor. When we finally stood, she looked at me with something new in those haunted gray eyes. Hope. It was terrifying. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. I might get us both killed. Better than the alternative.
I walked back to my room knowing I'd just promised to solve an impossible problem with no resources, no power, and no idea what I was doing. But I'd also made a friend, maybe the first real one I'd ever had. I was almost to my door when Marco Moretti stepped out of the shadows. I nearly screamed. Walk with me, he said. Not a request. We ended up in his office, the door closed, just the two of us and the weight of what had happened at dinner. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey from a crystal decanter. Didn't offer me any. I wasn't offended. I was 17 and technically his employee or ward or whatever I was. You could have gotten yourself killed tonight, he said, staring at the amber liquid. Vincent Russo doesn't tolerate disrespect, especially from women, especially from nobodies. Then I guess I'm lucky I'm under your protection. Are you? He turned to face me. Because protection goes both ways, Lexi. I protect you, you protect my interests. That includes my daughter. Can you do that? What does protecting Isabella look like? That depends. What did she tell you after dinner? I weighed my options. Lie and he'd know, the room was probably bugged. Truth and I might betray Isabella's trust. But if I was going to help her, I needed him to trust me. She said she won't marry Anthony Russo. That she'd rather run. And you told her you'd help her disappear. Not a question. I told her I'd help her find a third option. One that doesn't end in a wedding or a war. There isn't one. There's always one. You just haven't thought of it yet because you're thinking like a king. I met his gaze. Sometimes you need to think like a pawn. His eyebrows rose. Explain. Give me 48 hours. Let me figure out the players and the board. Then I'll tell you my idea. He studied me for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. You have confidence for someone who was eating from dumpsters 3 days ago. Confidence is all I've ever had. Well, that and a talent for finding angles nobody else sees. 24 hours, he said. After that, I make my own decision. And Lexi? If you're playing me, if this is some scheme to hurt my family or leverage yourself into something you're not entitled to, you'll learn very quickly why people fear the Moretti name. Understood. Good. Now get out of my office and get some sleep. You look like hell. I made it to my room before my knees gave out. I just promised to solve a mob war in 24 hours with nothing but nerve and desperation. Just like old times. Except this time the stakes weren't just my survival. They were hers too. I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the night on that laptop researching everything I could find about the Russo family. Vincent had 3 children. Anthony, the heir apparent, 22, Harvard-educated, being groomed to take over. Michael, the middle son who ran their legitimate businesses. Restaurants, real estate, import-export companies that probably imported more than furniture. And Sophia, the youngest. Sophia was the detail that snagged my attention. She'd been 19, a competitive equestrian headed for Olympic trials, engaged to a state senator's son. Society pages loved her. Then 2 years ago she disappeared. No social media updates. No public appearances. No mentions in the society pages that used to fawn over her riding championships. Same time as Elena Moretti died. I dug deeper, following threads through gossip columns and society blogs and news archives. Found one article, buried in a local paper, about an unfortunate accident at a stable. Sophia Russo recovering from injuries sustained when a horse threw her. No further details. The article was dated 3 days after Elena's car bomb. Coincidence? In this world I was learning there were no coincidences. By 6 a.m. I had the bones of an idea. By 7 a.m. I had a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. By 8 a.m. I was knocking on Marco's office door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Come in. He was already dressed, papers spread across his desk, phone at his ear. He held up a finger, wait, and finished his conversation in rapid Italian. When he hung up, he looked at me with something like amusement. 24 hours wasn't a challenge to come back in 12. Where's Sophia Russo? The amusement vanished. His expression went cold, dangerous. How do you know about Sophia? Research. She disappeared the same time as Elena died. I'm guessing there's a connection. Marco stood slowly, walked to the window. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral in a way that meant he was fighting to control it. What you're guessing about is none of your concern. It is if I'm going to solve your problem. Where? Sophia? He turned back to face me. Sophia Russo killed Elena. She was the one who planted the car bomb. Vincent covered it up, shipped her somewhere overseas where she couldn't be touched or questioned. The floor dropped out from under me. Why would she? Because Vincent ordered it. Because Elena was campaigning against drug trafficking in the city, making noise about exposing both our operations to federal investigators. Because she was gathering evidence, building a case, threatening to tear down everything we'd built. His hands fisted at his sides. Because in our world, principles are weaknesses to be exploited. Isabella doesn't know. Isabella thinks it was a rival family. Some random act of violence in an ongoing war. I let her believe that because the truth, that the girl who used to come to our house for her birthday parties, who she used to ride horses with, who she considered almost a sister, murdered her mother. He stopped. Swallowed. That truth would destroy her. The truth might also save her. He spun around. Explain. Now. I took a breath, trying to organize thoughts that had been churning all night. Vincent wants a union. Give him one, but not the one he's asking for. Sophia for Isabella. His daughter for yours. A different kind of merger. Sophia killed my wife. And if Isabella marries Anthony, she'll be tied to that family forever. She'll have to sit at family dinners with the people who orchestrated her mother's murder. She'll have to smile and play house and pretend everything is fine while dying inside. I stepped closer. But if Sophia comes back, faces justice for what she did publicly, if Vincent has to sacrifice his daughter to avoid a war, then Isabella stays free, you get justice for Elena, and Vincent loses face in front of every family in the city. He'll never propose another merger because everyone will know he can't protect his own children. Marco stared at me like I'd grown a second head. That's ruthless. You asked me to think like a pawn. Pawns survive by sacrificing other pieces. And if Vincent refuses? Then you have leverage. You know what Sophia did. You threatened to expose it, force a trial, drag the Russo name through the mud. Every family in the city will know Vincent killed an innocent woman for trying to do the right thing. He'll lose allies, business, respect, everything that matters in your world. I held his gaze. He gives up the marriage proposal or loses everything. Either way, Isabella is safe. Silence stretched between us. In the distance, I heard someone vacuuming. Normal house sounds in a house that was anything but normal. Finally, Marco laughed. It was a harsh sound, but genuine. You've been in this house for 3 days and you're already thinking like a crime lord. That's either impressive or terrifying. Can't it be both? With you, it usually is. He picked up his phone. I'm going to make some calls. If this works, you'll have earned more than room and board. If it doesn't, I know. Fish food in the harbor. I was going to say you'll learn an important lesson about overreaching. But sure, fish food works too. I turned to leave. Lexi. I looked back. Why are you really doing this? You could walk away right now with enough money to start over. What's in it for you? The honest answer caught in my throat. Because Isabella was the first person who'd looked at me like I mattered in ways that had nothing to do with what I could provide. Because Marco had given me shelter when he didn't have to, had gone after the Hendersons when I hadn't even asked. Because for the first time in my life I was part of something that felt almost like family. I like the food here, I said instead. Be ashamed to lose access to that kitchen. His smile was knowing. Set. Right. The food. Get some breakfast. You've earned it. I found Isabella in the library, pretending to read but obviously waiting. She jumped up when she saw me. Well? I have a plan. It's risky and possibly insane and might get us both killed, but it might work. Tell me. So I did. I watched her face cycle through shock, horror, understanding, and finally something like savage satisfaction. Sophia Russo killed my mother, she said quietly, like she was testing the words. My father never told me, but I knew it was personal. The way he reacted when I asked questions. The way he shut down whenever I mentioned the investigation. Her hands were shaking. You want to use her as a bargaining chip. I want to use the truth as a weapon. Different thing. Will it work? Depends on how much Vincent loves his daughter versus how much he loves his power. Then we're screwed. Vincent doesn't love anything but control. She started pacing the way she probably did when she was thinking through piano pieces. But if there's even a chance this keeps me from becoming Anthony Russo's property, from having to smile at the people who killed my mother, from becoming exactly what Vincent said, a bargaining chip, I'll take it. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. Marco made his calls, pulled his strings, set whatever trap he was setting. I stayed close to Isabella, both of us pretending normalcy while waiting for the world to explode. We attended her lessons. Calculus, literature, Italian conversation. We ate quiet dinners with just Marco, the three of us making small talk about nothing while everything hung in the balance. On the third evening, Vincent requested another meeting. This time he came alone. No bodyguards. No show of force. Just one man in an expensive suit who suddenly looked every one of his 57 years. I wasn't invited to this dinner. Neither was Isabella. We waited in the library, not talking, barely breathing, just existing in shared anxiety. Around 9 p.m. Maria found us. Your father wants to see you both. Now. We followed her to the office on numb legs. Marco stood behind his desk. Vincent Russo sat across from him, looking like someone had reached inside his chest and hollowed him out. Tell them, Marco said. Vincent's voice was hoarse. The marriage proposal is withdrawn. There will be no union of families. The territorial disputes will be settled through negotiation, not force. We'll split the eastern terminal 60-40. You get the larger share. Isabella sagged against me. I put an arm around her waist to hold her up. And in return? I asked because nobody else was going to. Vincent looked at me with pure hatred. In return, Sophia remains where she is. Safe. Hidden. And this family never speaks publicly of what she did. No, Isabella said. Both men turned to stare at her. No deal. Not unless Sophia comes back and faces trial for murdering my mother. Bella, Marco started. I deserve justice. My mother deserves justice. I don't care if it starts a war. I don't care if it's dangerous. I won't let her killer hide forever just so I don't have to marry some man I've never met. Her voice was shaking but firm. You want peace? Fine. But it comes with truth. Vincent stood. The girl doesn't understand what she's asking for. The girl understands perfectly, Isabella shot back. You killed my mother because she was trying to do the right thing. Then you tried to buy your way out of consequences. Now you're trying to sell your son's future to avoid facing what your daughter did. I'm done letting men like you decide what's fair. If you believe some battles are worth fighting even when you're terrified, drop a like so this story finds someone who knows what courage really costs. The room was deadly silent. Finally, Vincent turned to Marco. Control your daughter. She's controlled herself just fine. Better than your daughter managed, apparently. Vincent's face turned purple. You're making a mistake, Marco. A war will cost you more than you think. So will letting my daughter's mother go unavenged. So will teaching her that powerful men can murder innocent women and face no consequences. Marco's voice was ice. Sophia comes back and faces trial, or I expose everything. The bombing, the cover-up, your connection to the federal investigators Elena was working with. I have evidence. Witnesses. Enough to bury you and everyone you love. Your empire crumbles either way. At least if Sophia faces trial, you control the narrative. You can paint her as mentally ill, coerced, whatever story you need. But she faces justice. She'll spend life in prison. Should have thought of that before you ordered a hit on a woman whose only crime was having a conscience. Vincent left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the artwork on the walls. The moment he was gone, Isabella burst into tears. But these were different than the ones I'd seen before. These were relief and rage and grief all mixed together, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking through. Marco pulled her into his arms, something I hadn't seen him do before. I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. Should have let you decide what justice looked like instead of deciding for you. Why didn't you? The words were muffled against his shoulder. Because I wanted to protect you from how ugly this world really is. But you're right, you deserve to know. You deserve justice. He looked at me over her head, his expression complicated. Both of you did. That Friday, news broke that Sophia Russo had returned to the country to face charges in connection with Elena Moretti's death. Vincent held a press conference, his face carefully composed, calling it a tragic accident caused by his daughter's mental health crisis. Nobody believed him. The trial took 8 months. I was 18 by the time it ended, legally an adult, theoretically free to leave. I didn't leave. I sat in that courtroom beside Isabella every single day, watching justice happen in slow motion. It wasn't perfect. Sophia got 15 years, not life. She cried on the stand, talked about being coerced by her father, manipulated, afraid. Some of it might have even been true. Vincent still had money and influence. The Moretti family's hands were far from clean. But Isabella could finally breathe. That counted for something. 6 months after the trial ended, I was sitting in my room working on college applications when Marco knocked on my door. Got a minute? Sure. He handed me a folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, police reports. It took me a second to recognize the names. The Hendersons, my former foster family. What is this? The people who hurt you no longer own their house, their car, or their foster care license. They're being investigated for fraud, abuse, and embezzlement of state funds. The investigation is very thorough. They'll likely face charges within the month. He sat in the chair by my desk. I told you people who hurt children under my protection have unfortunate accidents. I keep my promises. My hands shook as I flipped through the documents. Evidence of everything, the abuse, the neglect, the way they pocketed money meant for kids like me. All of it compiled, documented, delivered to the right authorities. Why? I whispered. Because you're family now. And family takes care of each other. Family. The word settled over me like a warm blanket. Complicated and messy and probably not what most people meant when they said it, but real in a way nothing else in my life had ever been. Thank you. Don't thank me. You saved my daughter from a life she didn't choose. This is the least I could do. He stood, paused at the door. The college applications, where are you thinking? Columbia has a good criminal justice program. His laugh was genuine. Of course it does. Pre-law? Maybe. I figure someone should understand both sides of the law. The letter and the spirit. Let me know if you need recommendation letters. I know some people. I bet you do. After he left, I looked around my room. The books I'd chosen. The laptop I used daily. The photographs of me and Isabella at the trial, at dinners, at the movies Marco sometimes let us sneak out to see with armed escorts following at a discreet distance. A year ago, I'd been homeless and hopeless, dying slowly in doorways. Now I was studying for college in a Mafia don's mansion, planning to become a lawyer, living with people who'd probably committed crimes I couldn't even imagine but who'd also given me the closest thing to family I'd ever known. It was messy and complicated and wrong by every conventional standard. It was also the first place I'd ever felt safe. Isabella found me that evening in the music room. She'd started playing piano again, happier pieces now, though sometimes the sad ones crept back in when she thought nobody was listening. You're still here, she observed, settling onto the bench beside me. Where else would I go? Columbia, apparently. That's 2.5 hours away. Easy drive. You could visit. Apply there yourself. My father would never allow it. Then we convince him. We've taken down bigger obstacles than one overprotective crime boss. She smiled, a real one, the kind I saw more often now. Remember when you were just some homeless girl who passed out on our porch? Remember when you were just some lonely Mafia princess who cried over Chopin? We've come a long way. Yeah, we have. We sat there as evening light painted the room gold, two girls who'd found each other in the rain and decided to build something better than mere survival. Better than the hands we'd been dealt. Better than what anyone expected from damaged girls in a dangerous world. The rain started again that night, drumming against the windows like it had the first time I'd collapsed on these steps. I stood at my bedroom window watching it fall, remembering that scared, desperate girl who'd thought she had nowhere left to go. She'd been wrong. Sometimes the most dangerous places hold the safest people. Sometimes the ones you're supposed to fear are the ones who finally see you. Sometimes survival means accepting help from hands that aren't clean but are somehow still kind. My phone buzzed. Text from Isabella, movie night? Dad's letting us use the theater room. I typed back, be there in 5. Your turn to pick. Horror. You owe me from last week. You're going to regret that when you can't sleep. That's what I have you for. See you downstairs. I grabbed a sweatshirt and headed for the door. Halfway there, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The girl staring back looked different. Healthier. Stronger. Fed and sheltered and protected. Her eyes held something they hadn't before. Oh, I thought about that first night. About Marco with his gun and blood on his collar. About the choice to walk through his door instead of running into the rain. About every impossible decision that had led me here. I turned off the light and headed downstairs, toward the sound of Isabella's laughter echoing through the halls, toward the chosen family that had caught me when I fell. The rain kept falling. But I was finally home.